Good afternoon, friends, ladies, gentlemen. It's a very special thanks to the Penang Institute for helping to arrange this afternoon's lecture. And special note of thanks to the Chief Minister of Penang, Lim Guan Eng, who got his job the hard way by winning the trust and confidence of the public. And of course, special thanks also to Professor Dato Wu Wing Tai and the CEO of Penang Institute, Zairo Keo Johari. In fact, I remember actually interviewing his father, Keo Johari, when I was a reporter in the 1970s. Anyway, today I'll try my best to share with you what I went through in the course of my rather eventful career. By the way, my assistant, Miss Sun, she's the one helping me to put together the presentation. So I was born in Penang in 1954, year of the horse, and I went to Penang Free School. In fact, I was born just off Carnarvon Street, something like just 10 minutes down the road from here. And my father passed away when I was 9 years old. So I actually have been working since I was 10, trying to go to school and work at the same time. So for example, for some years I sold pineapples in a fresh fruit market that has now been torn down, but Penang Knights will remember it. It's called Siaboy. Yeah. And I give tuition, etc. And then in 1971 December, I finished my last O-levels paper, which was mathematics. And that afternoon, I noticed a queue outside a small office building in Welkie. So I joined the queue on the theory that if there's a queue, there must be something desirable in front of the queue. So anyhow, it turned out that the job was to be a newspaper folder in what was then a new newspaper called The Star. The Star at that time could not afford a machine to fold the newspaper, so they relied on human labor. So I was promptly signed up to fold newspapers together with a gang of laborers. We work from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. the following morning, and by 5 a.m. your face is all black with newsprint. Yeah. So that was my first job in The Star. Although officially I started as a reporter, but in fact I became a reporter only after first becoming a newspaper folder. There I was hired by the late K.S. Chung, the founder of The Star, to be a trainee reporter. I can still remember my salary was Malaysian ringgit, $120 a month. And my first day of the job, I was so serious that I actually went to work at 9 a.m. And no other reporter would ever do that. You start late and finish late. And as luck would have it, my first assignment was to cover the suicide of a Chinese police constable at the Chinese temple who had actually shot himself with his service revolver. And I had been told that, as a reporter, you must always ask questions. So when I arrived there, this guy was still, in the last few minutes of his life, there was one hole in the temple of his head, blood coming out. So I say, how do you feel? Because I thought that's my job, to ask questions. Right? So that was my introduction to journalism. Anyway, I want to be a little bit more serious for a minute to tell you about what Penang was like in those days when I left school. My growing up was the late 60s and early 70s. The situation actually at that time was very bad for Malaysia and for all Malaysians of all races, because we just emerged from the May 13 riots in 1969. For better or for worse, the leaders of those days have decided that it was necessary to launch a new economic policy, which no matter how you look at it, was quite divisive. For those Malaysians who happened to be of Chinese origin, it was definitely a time of low self-esteem and great difficulty. For example, unemployment among young people in Penang, as I recall, it seemed like almost 100%. So you continue your schooling. If you couldn't, you really were in trouble. In the audience today, I see some schoolmates, for example, who kindly come here to support me. And I think they have very strong memories too of what life was like. So I was very lucky, actually, to be able to even find a job. So anyway, to quickly fast forward, since time is limited, I went to Hong Kong. Just to share with you one more anecdote is that when I went to Hong Kong after some years in the Star as a reporter, sub-editor, editorial writer, and etc., I couldn't even afford to buy a plane ticket to Hong Kong. Such was our financial situation at that time. So I sold the only possession I had, which was a Honda S90 second-hand motorbike. And that was just enough to buy passage on a cargo vessel sailing to Hong Kong, one way. That's how I arrived in Hong Kong, on a cargo ship. And to make the life even more interesting than that, I had applied for a Hong Kong work permit because I had a sort of a job offer from the Hong Kong Standard. And the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur told me that they couldn't find my passport, which I sent to them for stamping. So I was probably quite a different guy from now. I mean, I was so adventurous that I then took what was then called the Express Ride Yacht to Kuala Lumpur, found my way to the British High Commission, personally located the official who was responsible for stamping passports, and asked him, where is my passport? I need it. I have a job waiting for me. And he said, no, you should be in the out tray, but my out tray is empty. And as though God was trying to help me, I said, why don't you look under your tray? He said, under the tray? Oh, my passport is actually there. Incredible. I then took the train to Singapore to rejoin the ship that took me to Hong Kong. Yeah. So I think there was very strong fighting spirit among young Penang boys in those days. We really had nothing to lose, so we tried anything, to move ahead. So I did arrive in Hong Kong. Again, to fast forward quickly, in 1993, I started my own business. I was a co-founder with a very good Hong Kong friend, Mr. Ye, whose family is quite prominent in Hong Kong in the construction industry. We started Value Partners. We are considered today one of the pioneers in investing in small cap stocks related to China. That's what makes our name. It sounds so simple when you read it on the board just like that, but in fact, it will be quite hard to explain to you what it really was like. Because asset management in the early 1990s was a very comfortable gentleman's game of 2-hour lunches dominated by, I would say, experienced Western executives, typically from London or the United States. And for Asian people, because Hong Kong was a British colony, typically only children of very rich and well-connected parents would have a chance to go into the industry. And although the industry was supposed to be competitive, in real life, it wasn't. Most people just followed the index, stuck very closely to the index so that they wouldn't underperform the index. And on that basis, they can justify their job. So when I went into the industry as a former journalist, I had no such preconceptions. I was very ready to shake up the industry as I saw fit. So I didn't buy index stocks. I bought small cap stocks. And I went all out for performance. That's what allowed us to establish ourselves by essentially ignoring what was the conventional wisdom about how to be a fund manager. Some details here, which I think it was part of the introduction, is that we still are, by the way, the first asset management company to be listed on the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong, and the only one listed in Asia outside Australia, actually. We have a market cap approximately $1 billion US. I'm the single largest shareholder. I own about 29% of the company, but we have several thousand shareholders from all over the world. We are one of the very few large-size asset management institutions in Asia today, and we make our name basically through performance. We have a very unusual track record of having captured performance awards continuously, about 80 of them now, since our founding in 1993. We now have 160, actually more than 170 staff now, with offices in Hong Kong, Chengdu, Shanghai, Taipei, and we'll soon open one in Singapore as well. Through our performance and also our unusual profit sharing scheme, because it's a listed company, the facts are all very transparent. We essentially set aside slightly over 20% of our profit every year to share with our employees. And our employees are also quite unusual because many of them have never worked anywhere else except in Value Partners. They were picked right out of university. Because I used to be very left-wing when I was younger, quite big believer in socialism. I did really try to upset the unspoken rules of Hong Kong's asset management industry by focusing my hiring only on working class people. The exact opposite of what was supposed to be done. So many of my fund managers to this day, despite being, I think, some of the best paid people in Hong Kong, they are still very humble, working class background, etc. Yeah. Okay, just very quickly, we are right there with the top brands now in Hong Kong. In fact, this year, we are able to even outsell. Our market share is even higher than that of very major market leaders like BNP Paribas or HSBC. We are among the top 5 selling asset management houses in the Hong Kong market. And for Asia Pacific, we are ranked by Asian investors as number 85. We are among the 100 biggest investors in the entire Asia Pacific region. And here I'm proud to say this as a Malaysian and an Asian, is that we have been recognized by prestigious publications like Institutional Investor or Barron's as being among the world's top 100 hedge funds, both in terms of size and in terms of quality of performance. That's international recognition. So like this year, among other things, I was given an honorary fellowship by Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and appointed by the Hong Kong government to the Financial Services Development Council. So there is quite a lot of recognition of what we have been able to do. This is not so important. What is important for me is to give a sense of that in Hong Kong, which was a British colony for 150 years, there are a few sacred cows that people really believe in. One of them is called the level playing field. The level playing field says that no one gets any special privileges. It may be it's quite different from Malaysia. So if you want to be in asset management, you may be local Hong Kong, you'll be hiring working class people or whatever, nobody cares. From day one, Value Partners have been competing with the very established firms like HSBC, Schroders, Fidelity, Templeton. That's why there are almost no success stories in local Hong Kong fund management. It is almost impossible to survive if from day one, you little baby, you're fighting with a 6-foot tall guy, a multinational. There are so many heartbreaking stories of very talented young people in Hong Kong who work for big houses and decide to come out on their own to start their own boutiques and discover that they just cannot survive. Usually the death rate is close to 100%. That's what makes Value Partners such an unusual story. Of late, I have actually been trying to advise the Hong Kong government to abandon the level playing field concept, great though it might sound, because it's becoming obvious that Hong Kong is losing the support of its own people because they feel they're not participating in the success story sufficiently. The fruits of Hong Kong's success, too much of it belongs to major multinationals and foreign-dominated firms. Because on the level playing field, the local guy ends up being hamburger flippers, waitresses, and holding minor jobs. Yeah. But anyway, that's why the Value Partner story is considered to be rather interesting in the Hong Kong context of how a local firm somehow managed to make it. But in fact, as you will see, the story is much more complicated than that. I'll try to illuminate it in the next 10 minutes. Yeah. Now, so I want to talk about what really happened with me and with Value Partners, since the speech is about my unusual career path. First of all, is to point out that, in fact, in many, many ways, I was the right person in the right place at the right time. Personally, I think that at least half of my success is due purely to luck and circumstance, rather than to anything I did or didn't do. For those of you who enjoy reading history, 1971, when I left Penang Free School and started work, coincided almost precisely with President Nixon's decision to take the United States off the gold standard. After that, we had a major party because you can print money as much as you like with no further discipline. Before that, you can only print a certain amount of money in US dollars based on a fixed exchange rate with gold. After that, no more. And other countries follow the US. So I think my generation is one of the most lucky generations in human history. We basically benefited by a money printing process that provide liquidity for a party that has now lasted more than 30 years. My entire career, more or less, until the party ended in 2008. The next generation will find it going much tougher. And then when I left journalism, I left the Asian Wall Street Journal in 1989 to join Morgan Grenfell as the head of research for Hong Kong, China. That was also the year beginning of one of the low points in Chinese history, which is the Tiananmen incident of June 4th, 1989. I joined Morgan Grenfell in around June 1989. It's like joining on the ground floor, you know. So I rode the elevator all the way up with the success of the Chinese economic miracle. Now, China, basically, you can trace the Chinese economic miracle, which transformed and lifted an estimated 250 million people out of poverty in the past few decades. This is the incredible achievement by any standard. Back to 1979, when Deng Xiaoping started the open door policy. And then it had a big setback in '89 because of social unrest, and they sent the tanks to Tiananmen, and there was a worldwide condemnation of the fact that the Chinese military killed quite a number of people, at least a few hundred. But anyway, the result was that if you started in the stock market at that time like me, you are starting at a time of extreme pessimism and gloom. So whether or not you look at my career starting in 1971 or starting in the stock market in 1989, I started at historical low points. And all I had to do was to ride the tide. And that's why I think I'm just a very lucky guy. But then you think a little bit further, you realize that lots of people like me were in the right place at the right time. So why was I the guy who actually became part of the Value Partners unusual story? Before going on to tell you my own interpretation of the other 50%, I will tell you upfront that I wasn't a very ambitious guy. I never really have life achievement targets or personal achievement goals, and I just drifted from one situation to another. I seldom have a plan lasting more than 1 or 2 months in terms of my career. Many people find it hard to believe, but it really is true. For people like me, and I think many of my friends I know, it just happened this way. You know, we just drifted as the tides push us. In fact, up to the probably the mid to late 1980s, I was telling my wife that if I can afford to see a movie once a week, I consider myself very happy because I'm a movie addict. You know, it's a very simple kind of guy. Yeah. Okay, putting aside chance and circumstance, there were only 3 distinguishing factors about my story. I'll sum it up as A, character, my character, and I'll illuminate it soon. 2 is my training, and 3 is the set of values I have. Yeah. In terms of my character, I consider myself an expert in learning how to learn. Since I never did go to college or university, I only finished O levels. I didn't even have A levels. I have to survive by essentially going through a non-stop process of lifelong learning. I never stop learning. And I read very quickly, absorb knowledge very quickly, and have a strong determination to research and learn anything I don't understand. I'm also a reading addict. My number one hobby is reading. At least 80% of the time, rather than doing anything else, I'm simply buried myself in a book. I'm a self-starter, self-motivated. I just see life as an adventure. And I'm quite okay with starting a journey with no maps and no certainty of what the destination may or may not be. Just go for it. Time and resource conscious, I wasn't like that before I went to Hong Kong. This is something that Hong Kong gave it to me as a gift. When I went to Hong Kong, it was a time of huge mental and psychological confusion. In fact, I thought I'll stay in Hong Kong for 2 years, save a certain amount of money, and return to Penang. Because Hong Kong was such a total difference. But in Penang in 1970, we had our first escalator in the Central Hotel in Penang Road. It went from the ground floor to the first floor. So I went up there with my brother. It was half the town came out to see this wonderful escalator. It was such a miracle. But in Hong Kong, when I went there, almost every building had the escalator. I was extremely confused and impressed. But at the same time, I realized that I may not be able to survive in this kind of environment. Because everything was very fast. There was no patience for anyone. And to me, there was also a bit of a lack of courtesy. When Hong Kong people were talking to each other, I actually thought they were scolding each other because they speak so loudly, etc., etc. So one thing they taught me was that time itself is a very major resource. I didn't feel that way before I went there, but now I'm very time conscious, and I think it helped me a lot. Now, the final point on this page is the personal integrity. My name is my brand is actually lesson 1 if you join Value Partners. I will personally conduct what amounts to a training or indoctrination session for new arrivals. And I always emphasize that even more important than the name of the company is your personal name. Your name is actually your brand. And if the name or the brand becomes bad, you cannot be a success in life. I noticed that in some countries like the mainland of China, people sometimes change their names because they know that their previous name was terrible. It is associated with lack of integrity or trying to make a fast buck or whatever. So they change their name legally to get a new brand. But in most other countries, it's actually very difficult to escape from the name you were given from the very beginning. Yeah. So there's a lot of emphasis on cultivating a good brand. A gift from my journalism days that's very useful in Asian investing is to put events in a historical, political, and social context. I feel that MBA classes, accounting classes, and other such types of classes are of only limited usefulness in preparing one for a career, a real career in investing. So much of what happens in Asia is decided by people like Lim Guan Eng. They make political decisions that may not be totally logical from an economic point of view. But in fact, you really got to understand what's driving it. And also, another thing I'm quite good at is that I can honestly say, hand on my heart, that I'm not a money crazy guy. My profession and industry, asset management, attract a lot of people who are completely money crazy. We say, why you want to join asset management or investment banking? They say, oh, we are interested in this. But after a while, you discover actually they're not interested at all. They're only thinking this may be an avenue for them to make a lot of money. And in my experience with such people is that they seldom become really successful in my field. They're too obsessed in making money when they should be obsessed with professional excellence. I always believe that if you are the best heart surgeon in the town, you don't have to find money. Money will find you. So for the same reason, I believe that I'm the best fund manager in Hong Kong. The funds will find me. I don't have to find them. And so far, my experience is true. I don't worry about the money. I worry about whether my performance is good and my personal integrity is good. If it is, I was actually very sure that so long as my health remains intact, we will be doing very well in our industry. And so far, I've been proven right. Money is a distraction. Don't spend too much time thinking about it. But you must focus on being a professional top, if possible, top 20%, but even better, top 5% of whatever profession you're doing. Then also in Asia, we are very short of soft skills. Even today, one of my major barriers to expanding my business is that we have all these kids with impressive hard skills. You ask them to pass an exam, memorize a book, learn the formula, they usually get A. But you ask for soft skills like knowing how to talk to people, leadership skill, communication skill, a bit of EQ. It's very hard to find such people. So I may not be very good at this, but I'm very conscious of the need to be able to connect with people, to provide inspiration and leadership to my staff, and to communicate. I was very inspired when I was young by, of all things, the stories of how the British Empire was built. All these stories about young Englishmen sent out from the UK and been asked to be district officers in places like India, responsible for maybe a few 100,000 people. They are simultaneously the administrator, the magistrate, the chief health officer, and God knows what else. And I thought if those young English people can do it, what's wrong with we Asians? We should try to. So this inspired me. The final point is that you can never outperform in the market by following the crowd. Almost by definition, the crowd is the market. To be better than the market, you got to now and then go against the crowd. It is important to realize that almost everything you know and I know is actually quite useless information because it's already in the stock prices. What you really want is that you want to gain additional insight or additional smartness to be able to be ahead of the curve.